All right, we have got Carl Gallups, who's going to be joining us in just a minute. Zach is getting things queued up and getting that ready to go. He's got a new book coming out September 28th called Be Thou Prepared, Equipping the Church for Persecution and Times of Trouble. And I read enough of it this morning. I shouldn't say briefly. I spent probably 2 hours actually this morning. Actually, Dan, I have to admit, part of the reason my notes didn't get all done as quickly as normal is because I was reading a lot of what Carl had to say, so I got behind.
I bet you it was a fascinating read.
It's really good. I can only read as much as Amazon will let me, but it was really good. So let's bring him up. Carl Gallups, welcome to Rush to Reason. I should say welcome back to Rush to Reason.
Yeah, thank you, John. It's always a pleasure to be with you. And listen, thank you for reading portions of my book there on Amazon. Surely you've got a copy coming to you if you don't have it already.
I got the thumbs up from Zach, so yes, it's coming. That's great. I will read it. I look forward to it. I enjoyed what I was able to read this morning, which you can't get everything on Amazon, but you can get a pretty good idea of what it's going to be like. So I've got a bunch of.
You can get a good idea, but you know what's aggravating? I've tried doing that with books on Amazon, and you start reading and you get all engrossed, and then you turn the page and it's not there.
I know, it's blank. It's like, oh, really? I wanted to know that. Okay, so I've got a lot of questions. You guys actually sent me some questions to even ask. I'm going to intertwine the two because I was reading that this morning. I'm thinking, man, this thing is, first of all, I want to give a little background on it because in the introduction you talk about just different things that have happened and how you could actually find yourself in an area where you should have prepared better than you did. And you start off the book in the opening talking about Katrina. Talk about that story real quick.
Oh, yeah. Listen, first of all, this book comes out of my 40 years of experience, 10 years as a Florida law enforcement officer, 2 different sheriff's offices, criminal investigations, 30-plus years in ministry on the Gulf Coast. We live in Hurricane Alley, and the book is not about hurricanes, but I use that example. I start off with the example of Katrina. Look, I lived through Ivan and Dennis and Katrina, and when I say lived, I mean just barely. We got hit full on here. I mean, it was horrific. We were without everything for days and into weeks, and people's homes were destroyed. People were killed. Their lives were turned upside down. And so I start the book with that because I give a particular story of a particular man. It's a true story, and I give all the references to it in my book, of course. I didn't interview this guy personally, but he was interviewed by major magazines and news media. And he starts, the book starts with the words, "It happened before. It can happen again."
Yeah, good point.
And that's the thing. People, we're so blessed in this nation, John. We live so comfortably, relatively speaking. And
we do.
The billions of people in the world don't have a clue how wonderfully we live. And so we get lulled into this sense that, hey, nothing bad's going to happen, and if it does, no big deal. A day or two,
I'll go to the grocery store, no problem. The food will be there. I'll go fill up my gasoline tank. It won't be any problems. No big deal.
Right.
And I also want to make sure, and I think Carl, you would agree with this. I am by no means ever going to come out and preach, or talk about doom and gloom and all those sorts of things. I'm not that kind of guy either. But after reading your book, you and I are a lot alike because I do believe that. Wait a minute, time out. God also gave us common sense to be ready for things when they come up. And I think that's really what you're saying in the book here is, listen, folks, time out. There's one thing to be this, I'm going to believe that God's going to meet all of my needs. And you know what? And that's a great faith to have. I'm never going to want to take that away from somebody, Carl. Yeah. But there's a difference between, and you talk about this, difference between living by faith and faithfulness to God. Those are not one and the same.
Exactly. Oh, John, beautifully put. A big difference between living by faith and faithful living. Because, people who say that, look, I understand. Well, first of all, let me just say with you, no, I'm with you. I'm not a gloom and doom guy. I don't set dates and times. I mean, look, I know the prophetic times in which we're living. I mean, that can't be denied. We're living in very prophetic times and very trying times. And so that's the theme of my book. Look, just be prepared for that. And God's Word tells us to. And so people who say, look, I'm just going to live by faith. God's going to take care of me. And I say to those people, look, please don't be that ridiculous. I mean, of course we live by faith. I mean, look at our brothers and sisters in Iraq, hundreds of thousands that got run out of their homes and cities and towns and into the deserts with nothing but the clothes on their back. Of course, there was a complete dependence upon God. But here's what I say to people living in America who say, I'm just going to live by faith. Well, then quit quit grocery shopping. Your food will just show up.
That's right. Somebody will deliver it tomorrow morning. That's right.
Yeah. Don't buy insurance anymore.
Well.
Don't wear your seatbelt anymore. Don't brush your teeth. Don't go to the doctor when you have the flu. Don't lock your doors at night. I mean, just live by faith. Just trust God, right?
Yeah. Well, when the gas tank gets empty, don't go to the gas station and fill up. It'll just fill itself up.
It'll just fill itself up. I mean, so, you can take that to ridiculousness and say, I'm just going to live by faith. Well, what does that mean? Of course we live by faith if you belong to the Lord. Of course.
Right.
My utter and total dependence is in the Lord. And no, I don't store up warehouses full of stuff. I don't have 3 barns on my property loaded with guns and ammo and food and But what I do, I mean, I live in Hurricane Alley.
Right.
So we're prepared. I've got a couple of generators, and I keep gas here, and I keep food and water cleansing products and some guns and ammo just for personal protection and survival if need be, because I have been in situations where we had no law enforcement for days and days. We had no grocery stores and gas stations for weeks. And so, but I was prepared. And so we were able to live. But the most important thing, John, is not so that we can selfishly live, but if we're prepared as believers, if we're prepared, then the day after tragedy strikes, guess what we're free to do? We're free to minister to others.
That's right. And if there's anything I even got out of just the quick read I did today, it really wasn't quick. I probably spent an hour and a half, 2 hours reading what I actually could out of it. But if there's anything I read today was the reminder even to myself, and I'm a lot like you already, but it was a reminder to me even that, wait a minute, time out. We need to be prepared, not so much a quote-unquote prepper, but let's be prepared so that if, in fact, one of those things does come, in your world it could be a hurricane, in my world up here it could be a freak snowstorm that locks everybody in for a week solid. I mean, there's all sorts of things that could go on, including terrorist attacks and EMPs and so on and so forth. To your point, though, we as Christians need to be prepared after that event so that A, we're taken care of, and then B, who else can we share the love of Christ to and hopefully have an open door to talk about that?
Exactly. John, you nailed it. You nailed it. And so, of course, natural disasters, and one of the things I do in my book, and I don't know how much of it's on Amazon, so I don't know what you read, but one of the things, I go all the way back to the early church, and I show, look, here's the early church lived in disasters. They lived with earthquakes and famines. Paul had to
more so than we do.
Yeah, just like we do. But they also lived with persecution.
Right.
They lived with martyrdom. They lived with governmental decrees and executive orders officially persecuting Christians and jailing them, putting them to death, throwing them to the lions. I mean, how did the church deal with all of that?
Yeah, that's a great point.
So I deal with all that in my book. And look where we are now, brother. I mean, we've got, the homosexual rulings, the woman, Kim Davis, for the first time in history, a person goes to jail in America because she believes a marriage is between a man and a woman.
Right.
We've got civil disobedience, the Ferguson deals, we've got terrorists coming into our nation, our borders are broken, hundreds of thousands of Muslims being purposely imported and scattered over our nation. I mean, we're living in strange times, weird American times.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
My book just says, be prepared.
All right, I got to take a quick time out. We got to pay for the show that we're doing right now. So I'm going to bring Carl back up. Again, Carl Gallups. Carl, man, I love having you on. It's just great. I feel like the more I have you on, the better I get to know you, and I really, really enjoy it. And I didn't mean to take lines out of your book when I promoted my last little commercial there for my accountant. But you know what? It's true on that end of it too, because if you don't have somebody there helping you with what's going to happen on down the road, because even financially, Carl, we need to be prepared for when some of these times might actually come up. Correct?
Oh yes. Listen, first of all, thank you for all the gracious words you've said about me, and I love coming on your show, John. And secondly, listen, you've proven the point again. So you're urging and encouraging people to take care of their financial matters in an appropriate way, to give some forethought, to plan ahead, to think about the future, to prepare for unstable times and uncertain times. Well, people do that all the time, and people pay good money to get that done. Yeah. Well, that's preparing. I mean, that's preparedness. That's prepping, if you will.
That's right.
So, I mean, again, we get back to that, well, I'm just going to let the Lord provide. Really? So you don't invest for your future. You don't invest in retirement. You don't have savings accounts. You don't have insurance accounts. What do you mean? So, I'm just trying to encourage Christians, look, we're living in prophetic times. We're living in tumultuous times around the world. We're living in uncertain times in our nation. Prayerfully, some of that will smooth out in the years to come, but we don't know. So in the meantime, prepare, and just prepare at least along the lines of a natural disaster, just reasonable, rational preparedness. Everybody lives in a flood zone or a tornado zone or a hurricane zone or a fire zone or a snow zone. Prepare for it.
That's right. So here's a question, Carl, and I think I know the answer to this, but I want to get your take on this. Okay. Do you think that some people, Christians in a lot of cases, because there are a lot of Christians that are preppers, and I'm not trying to categorize people by any means, but do you think in some cases some folks don't prep, quote unquote, or don't prepare for the future in this particular manner because they view it as being some off the wall guy that's going to move to Idaho in a cabin and get a generator and live off the grid and be all by himself, and in their mind when they see preparedness, that's what they think of. Do you think that's part of it and why they just don't have any inkling to actually look at some of this stuff?
Yes, I think you're exactly right. And here's the thing, John. Listen, I refuse, to the best of my ability, to let people steal the language from us. Preparation, prepping, prepper, those words are becoming pejoratives, but I refuse to let it be. I mean, if there's a stereotype that's put out there of a prepper, a shaggy bearded guy eating grubs, wearing camo, living under a log in the woods, but no, I mean, I'm just talking about everyday people. I want your audience to remember, I'm a pastor. I've been a pastor for 29 years in one church. I mean, I'm not living in the woods alone. I'm involved in life all over the world for the gospel's sake. For 29 years in one church. I was a cop for 10 years before that. My message in this book is, Christians, wake up. Wake up. Let's be prepared so our families are taken care of whenever anything happens, and we're living in times of Christians beginning to be persecuted in the United States. Let's prepare for persecution. Let's prepare for times of trouble so that we and our families are prepared. And the Bible says that the person that doesn't provide for their own family is worse than an unbeliever.
It's true.
So let's prepare for our families so that when the day of trouble comes, we can stand our ground. That's Ephesians 6:10, and that we can minister to the world around us. Don't check out. Don't go hide in a hole. We've been raised up for such a time as this. We're the salt and the light.
Amen.
That we're ambassadors for the kingdom, John. So that's why we prepare.
That's right. So, question I have for you.
Yeah.
Let's kind of spin off of what you just mentioned a moment ago. Again, we're talking to Carl Gallups' new book that he's got coming out. September 28th is when it's going to come out. It's called Be Thou Prepared, Equipping the Church for Persecution and Times of Trouble. So, the title itself, Times of Trouble. What do you think are going to be some of those avenues, those threats really that are going to come to American churches and Christians today?
Thank you. That's an excellent question. And let me just say to your audience, you said September 28th because that is what Amazon says, but that's incorrect, and I don't know why Amazon hasn't corrected it. The book is available now.
Awesome.
Oh, fantastic.
You can order it from Amazon. You'll get it in just a couple of days.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay, great. Good news.
Yeah. So it's available now.
Good deal.
In fact, it's already in its second or third printing, and it just released a few days ago. So
awesome. Very good.
God's really blessing it. But anyway, and by the way, this book is written for churches, for pastors, for families, for Bible studies, for even if you're not a Christian.
Exactly. No, it's an easy read, and it's not Christianese to where if you're not a Christian reading it, you're going to feel uncomfortable. Right. It literally just is telling you the brass tacks of what you need to do.
Thank you so much. Okay, now back to your question, times of trouble, what do I foresee? Well, look, I don't claim to be a prophet here, but I'm looking at, my homeland, the United States of America, and I'm heartbroken about so many things, and I don't want to turn this into politics because left, right, just like you were talking with your other guest earlier, that's not the issue here. The issue is right and wrong, truth and lies. Our nation has swallowed so many lies, we have forgotten what truth is, and we're so divided. And I personally think a lot of that divisiveness has been calculated and has been arbitrated and pushed upon us, but regardless of that, I foresee the possibility, unless there's some kind of huge spiritual healing in our nation, the possibility of more and more Ferguson-type things, civil disobedience. And here's the thing. People say, well, civil disobedience, that doesn't affect me. Well, it depends.
It affected those business owners in Ferguson to a great deal.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Sometimes civil disobedience shuts down entire cities.
That's right.
Shuts down roads and thoroughfares and your job and businesses and grocery stores and gas stations and schools and the safety of your family and so that's always a possibility. And listen, I don't want to get sensational here, but this is in mainstream media. We've got key law enforcement figures in the federal government saying that there are ISIS cells within all 50 states that the FBI has identified right now.
Mm-hmm.
So ISIS is here. Hundreds of thousands of Muslim refugees are being purposely transported into our nation and scattered around the nation. Our borders are broken. We have millions of people coming across our borders. We don't know who they are, where they are, and where they're going and what they're doing until they've committed some atrocity. And we've got racial division. So, again, I don't walk around wringing my hands every day. I love life. I love people. I just get out there in the midst, and here's where we live by faith. I just get out there in the midst of life and just trust God. Look, God, okay, I've taken care of myself. I'm got my head on a swivel. I've taken all the precautions. I'm prepared. Now I'm just going to go live, and I'm going to go minister to people, and I'm not going to worry about every minute of my life. That belongs to the Lord. But in the meantime, to your question, preparing for times of trouble. What could it be? Well, let's just talk about it. It could be civil disobedience, and with that could come the closure of entire towns and cities. It could be something, listen, I mentioned this in my book. Everybody's talking about EMP attacks, electromagnetic pulse, and that could be a nuclear detonation over our atmosphere that shuts down all of our grid and our electronic. But it doesn't have to be an enemy attack, John. It could be a solar flare incident.
True.
In the 1800s, we had a coronal effect that, of course, all we had back then electronically was telegraphs, and I write about this in my book. But it shut down the telegraph system and caused instruments and equipment to burst into flames and wires to pop and fall and because of a solar flare.
Right.
So now everything's electronic.
So what you're saying is it could be natural, it could be something that is drummed up by man, it could be a combination of the two. One of those things could actually turn something else, civil disobedience, make that, turn that on its head, if you would. So what you're really saying, Carl, is there's a number of factors out there that could end up affecting us. So here's a question. This part I couldn't tell in the book if it's there. How many days should somebody prepare for? How many days or years? Maybe the right question is how many days or years? Yeah.
Listen, that's a good question, and I don't know. I'm trying to go through my brain if I answer that directly and specifically, but generally my answer is, look. Again, I live in Hurricane Alley, so I'm prepared to have at least several weeks of supplies so that I can exist. Because here's the thing: if you're caught where you don't even have a few days or a week or two of supplies, and some major disaster, natural disaster, earthquake, some natural disaster happens, much less the entire closing down of the city or the nation or martial law. I mean, if you've got several weeks of supplies, within those weeks, hopefully you will be making networks and friendships with other people, and you're able to know where you're going to go from there. But if you don't have some days or some weeks, I mean, you're in panic mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing. I tell people, look, here's why I want people to get prepared, so that you don't have to live your life in anxiety. Christians shouldn't be living in anxiety. God has not given us a spirit of fear, right? But
no, you're exactly right. Exactly right.
Sound mind. And so I say to Christians, look, be reasonably prepared. Have at least several weeks, and I don't think it's unreasonable to have several months. So much now is available to prepare for months, even years.
That's true.
There are food supplies.
That's right.
Take up less than a closet full that you can feed your family for a year.
That's exactly right. Good point. Dan, you wanted to ask something?
Yeah, I do. Carl, when I was men's ministry leader at our church, one of the things that I was looking into was having a resource list within the church in case of an emergency, like, this guy knows how to be a plumber, this guy knows how to fix this or that. Is that something
talking about me?
Yeah, exactly. we need John in our church, trying to get him to move down to Douglas County, land of the free. Yeah. But he insists on living in Boulder. I have no idea why. But what about something like that? Is that a good idea for a church to have that, so you have something to go to if something happens?
Yeah, Dan, no, that's a brilliant point. In the church that I pastor, we have that, and we learned the hard way. Again, I've been there 29 years. We've been through a lot of disasters along the Gulf Coast and in the southeast United States, and we've helped even when we weren't hit directly. We've gone into other areas and helped. I mean, when Birmingham area, Tuscaloosa got clobbered by the tornadoes and all up in that area, we went. When Katrina hit along the Gulf Coast and devastated this area, we went. When Ivan hit, it hit us. And I mean, we were down for months, and we had many people in our church that lost their homes entirely. So we learned quickly. We need to pool our resources. We need to know who's what, who's got what, who will do what, who can go. We've got some people in our church that happen to have 3 or 4 generators. Why? They've got 1 or 2 for themselves, and they purposely bought extra to help other people.
Yeah,
and that's biblical.
Well, it's funny. I've got some folks in my church that we talk about some of these things periodically, and I've got a couple of good friends that say, you know what, if something really bad happens, John, we're just going to come move in with you.
Yeah, and let me address that. Please let me address that, John and Dan. That is so unbiblical.
I know.
And I'm sure your friends are beautiful people, and maybe they're just kidding.
I think they are, but
it's funny when people say, I'm just going to live by faith. What they mean is, I'm not going to prepare. I'm going to go around with my head in the sand until something bad happens, and I'm coming moving in with you because you did prepare. And lo and behold, look, God provided for me.
Yeah, good.
Well, maybe that's why John collects, brass and lead.
I'm
just saying.
Could be. Carl, man, I've really enjoyed this so much. You're welcome back, as you know, anytime. Zach is leaving us. Dan, who you just heard a minute ago, is going to take his place. You'll be hearing from Dan. Your new book, Be Thou Prepared, Equipping the Church for Persecution in Times of Trouble, available now. Carl, you're a gentleman. I really appreciate it very much.
Oh, thank you so much, John. I love coming on with you. You guys are a hoot, and God bless you. Keep your eyes on Jesus, my friend.
We'll do it, man. Thank you very much.